All right, guys. So I love when a woke revolutionary activist gets a reality check. And boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, do I have a brutal reality check for you guys this time, as we got to talk about Miss Angelle Bradford, who was testifying in the Senate recently in regards to a hearing on the impacts of plastic production and disposal. And this woman has a dream of ending all plastic use. Okay, she wants to stop the plastics industry, right? Because like all these activists, including the fossil fuel activists, which, you know, plastics, 90% of plastics, I believe, are made from fossil fuels. They don't understand that you can't just stop using something that is just so fundamental to our basic quality of life. You just can't stop using it, right? It's something that we have to live with. And what these people don't really understand about life is that there are no solutions. There are pros and cons. It's about what pros are you willing to accept and what cons are you willing to accept. Everything's about trade-offs, man, right? If you replace plastics with something else, there are going to be more pros and cons. If you replace fossil fuels with more renewable sources of energy, there are going to be pros and cons. And a lot of people just don't realize this stuff. They haven't even thought about just how integral plastics and fossil fuels are to our lives, okay? And this Republican congressman is going to set her straight, okay? His name is Markwayne Mullin. He's a Republican from Oklahoma. He's going to give her a brutal reality check on plastics and the reality of the world that we live in. That is not something that we can necessarily stop using. So I want to react to it. But before I get in that, I just want to let you guys know, if you like my channel, you support my channel, you can check out my merch. Like, for example, you can check out my signature racist mug, which is a daily reminder of the 2023 definition of racist, according to the left, which is anybody who disagrees with the Democrat Party. It also has my logo on the back, Team BCP. You guys can check that out at my website, gforemanbcp.com. Get 20% off using discount code TEAMBCP. So without further ado, let's get it.
Thank you, Chairman. Ms. Bradford, in your testimony, did I understand you right? So that you want to end all plastic manufacturing?
I said the plastics industry must be stopped.
Which means, that you want to end plastic manufacturing, right? That's what it sounds like to me.
So does that mean end plastic manufacturing?
I mean, in my dream world, sure, but I think that go ahead.
No, so I don't mean to be condescending here. I just point out what's going to replace your glasses. Like,
so
how
I
would you
do
wear your
know
glasses around your face. They're made of plastic.
Maybe.
No,
I don't know what they're made out of.
They are. What about, and I just point out some things here because I just want to be realistic when we're having conversations, because when statements are made like this, I just want to open people's eyes and say, well, okay, that's easy to say, but what's the solution? Your water bottle in front of you.
This one?
Yes. That plastic?
No.
The lid is. That's plastic.
Right. So
Right.
I would say to your question that I would first be concerned about single-use plastics.
Yeah, so single-use plastic on the lower end of the estimation spectrum here is about probably 30 to 40% of the plastics that we produce and use each year. Okay, they're for single use. But again, that doesn't account for all the other plastics that we use. Now, I definitely think that we should definitely try to reduce the number of single-use plastics. I definitely think we should be trying to reuse and recycle more plastics. But with all things in life, it's just not that simple. I just can't come up here and say that we must recycle all plastics when it's basically impossible to do, right? Plastic actually really doesn't get recycled even when thrown in the recycle bin. I think only like, 5 to 10% of plastics are actually recycled per year. And the reason why is because, to be honest, plastic gets more toxic as you reuse it. It also is hard to sort through because there are a bunch of different types of plastics and you just can't melt them all together. Okay, that's just not how it works. It's extremely difficult, basically damn near impossible to actually really recycle plastics at a significant rate, which again, that's the reality, right? It's pros and cons. The pro is that it makes life much easier, okay, especially for people of, low income who are poor, who, rely on plastics. And the cons is that, hey, you have some environmental issues. But again, that's just something that we have to deal with. We have to come up with solutions to mitigate the damage rather than to try to ban plastics altogether. Same thing with climate change, right? I'm not really a staunch conservative or a staunch liberal on climate change. I'm actually a moderate. I'm in the middle, right? I think that if climate change is occurring, whether it's man-made or not, that's up for you to decide. We should try to focus on adaptation. How do we adapt as humans rather than mitigation? Because we're not going to mitigate it, right? If it's actually happening, whether it's natural or man-made, again, that's up for you to decide. We should adapt. And I think that fossil fuels play a big role in adaptation. And that's why I'm not necessarily one of these people that's like, oh, we need to stop using fossil. No, we have to continue to use fossil fuels. And it's going to be key to adapting to climate change, right? If you believe that it's happening, whether it's man-made or not.
And then we can talk about alternatives to this.
Your cell phone there, is it plastic?
The cases, but it's glass because I broke
the components inside of
screen
it's not
yesterday.
plastic? The components made out of it's not plastic? Yeah, they are. The water that you filled that water bottle up with, where'd you fill that water bottle up out of?
A water filling station.
All right, and it was delivered by a drink station that was plastic?
I didn't check.
The edges are. The piping coming to it. Now, you have a couple of choices with the piping. We could go back to using wood, but then you have to line it in chemical. Or we could go back and use lead, because we used to have water piping that was lead. That was harmful to us.
Again, like I tell you guys, it's all pros and cons, right? You have all these different options. You just got to weigh what's the pros, what's the cons, what trade-offs are you willing to accept, what trade-offs you're not willing to accept. There's no perfect solution, right? There is no perfect solution.
You go back to galvanized, but galvanized rust and had discoloration. We go back to copper, but copper has to be mined, and everybody wants to stop mining in the U.S.
Yeah, the woke revolutionaries don't like that, right? They don't like that. They want to just relegate the mining to, the poor people, the poor black folks in Africa, okay? To put all these minerals in, their electric cars and stuff, right? And their electric batteries that they claim is going to save the planet. Amazing.
So you use plastic to deliver piping that you fill that water bottle up with today. I point this out because the clothes you have on, I guarantee you have plastic in it. The shoes you have on your feet, the soles of those shoes are plastic. So we talk about any plastic manufacturing, and everybody in here cheers when you say that, but everybody here is depending on plastic as you set.
Same thing with fossil fuels, right? Which, again, plastics are dependent on fossil fuels. Everybody cheers when you say, let's stop oil, right? Let's stop the oil and gas industry and using fossil fuels. But everybody in the room that's cheering it actively uses fossil fuels, and they emit carbon dioxide into the atmosphere every single day, right? That's what they do. Okay, I mean, again, if we stop using fossil fuels and we stop using plastics, we'd be living in the Stone Ages. Okay, our quality of life would decrease significantly. We simply don't have the technology to replace these things yet. Okay, yet.
So if you want to end it, then quit using it. It's kind of like I don't shop at certain places right now because I don't agree with some of their policies. I choose not to do that. You can choose to not use plastic. Do your work.
Except she can't, right? She can't, because quite literally almost everything is made of plastic. So she really can't choose not to.
If you believe it, then live it that way. And if not, then tell me what the solution is. Mr. Sunday?
She doesn't have a solution, right? None of these people ever have a solution. The only solution is an extreme idea that has no possibility of actually coming to fruition in the first place, right? That's all they have, okay? This is why they're living in dream world, okay? They don't have any solutions. They don't. But again, ultimately, there are no solutions, okay? There are no solutions. People have to remember that. There's only trade-offs. If you replace plastic with something else, it's going to have pros and cons, right? It's going to have pros and cons, and then people be debating about whether or not we should replace that. It is what it is.
Can you manufacture a car today without plastic? Because we talked about manufacturing, the chairman brought up manufacturing cars, is it is safe, but the components that go into the cars today, can you do that without plastic?
No, Senator, and increasingly so with the new mileage mandates. You increasingly need to use automotive components that are plastics derived.
So we wouldn't have manufacturing, today's modern manufacturing, if we didn't have plastics, correct?
Correct.
Ms. Jackson, do you agree with that statement?
Yes.
So what's the alternative for manufacturing? Because the Democrats talk about middle-class wages. Middle-class wages typically come directly from manufacturing. What is it that we're manufacturing that doesn't have plastic in it today?
Nothing, and you know what? It would increase the cost of everything if we turn to an alternative, and it would disproportionately impact low-income people who have lower incomes. It would be another regressive tax on the poor.
Ding, 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 right? Same thing with all the other woke environmental policies, right? Could you imagine how the poor would be affected if we stopped using fossil fuels, right? Can you imagine who would suffer the most? The rich are rich enough to just, use whatever renewable or alternative woke energy source that's available, right? They're rich enough to buy it. The poor are not, right? The poor are not. They will have no alternative. They will have no alternative. And again, this is a reality that the woke revolutionaries don't really want to face. They don't really want to address this because they're living in cuckoo for Cocoa Puff world.
So according to your testimony, Ms. Jackson, it sounds like you're saying that the environmental justice agenda does more harm than good for low-income families. Is that correct?
Yes, and I have the unique opportunity to see both sides when the industry comes in the area and when it doesn't. As an auditor, I worked on Nissan North America. Nissan North America moved to Smyrna, Tennessee, where it built the largest automotive manufacturing plants. And the transformation was astonishing. I mean, it went from a community that was poor to a community that U.S. World News voted one of the top 10 places to retire. You had poor people in areas that were poor that became middle class. You had middle class people that became upper middle class, and a lot of upper middle class people that became affluent.
Ain't that crazy how that works, right? Ain't it crazy what happens when you keep jobs, manufacturing jobs here in America, right? When you don't ship them off to China in exchange for cheap labor, right? Those are amazing stories, right? They're absolutely amazing stories. But again, the activists, they don't want to see this, right? They don't want to see this type of stuff being made here in the U.S. because, again, it's too dangerous, right? It hurts the environment too much. Again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have environmental regulations that, again, for example, try to limit the amount of plastics that we're putting in the ocean. Like 1 out of 3 fish that we eat, has plastics, right? So yeah, we're definitely, as humans, consuming too much plastic is not good for us. But again, it's a trade-off. I'm just saying that things have to be reasonable, okay? You can't go as far as to try to ban the whole thing or to ban the manufacturing of it because it just doesn't make sense.
They have attractions, they have amenities, they have housing, affordability. I mean, the amount of prosperity in that area has resonated out 3 counties. 3 counties. I've also had the opportunity to see when an industrial, and that wouldn't happen if you don't have an industrial complex moving into the area where you're talking about high economics. I've also seen the other side where all of a sudden you have deteriorating buildings, empty storefronts, dilapidated housing, people standing on street corner housing, that families that are broken. So we need to balance the fact that people's lives need economic upward mobility. And we can't just say, we're going to take out an industry and leave people poorer than they were. Poverty causes the worst health care in this country. Poverty is the one that destroys lives. It destroys health. It creates trauma. So we need to make sure that when we're talking about these issues, we take into account the human loss of life, not just the environmental impacts.
Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. She's right. I mean, she's 100% right. That's the trade-off that I'm talking about here, right? Yes, we're going to have some environmental issues when it comes to using fossil fuels and plastics, but in exchange, look at the quality of life, right? What's better, to not have fossil fuels and plastics and for humans to have less of a quality of life and die, earlier, right? Not live as long, and to, have more health problems and stuff like that, or to deal with the cons of plastics and fossil fuels while humans live longer, have a better overall quality of life, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, better jobs, more money, whatever. But you have to deal with a little bit of, environmental issues. I'm just saying, right? The trade-off here is clear, okay? It's very clear. That was a great job by that Republican senator of exposing how crazy some of the extremism is coming from the left, and the fact that these people really have no business having these discussions in Congress in the first place. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.